ELeague obviously took place. Groups A through D started with 32 players total, 8 players in each group. We pared it down to 6. If you haven't seen results, I'll pull those up in a second. But really, since you brought it up, this seemed like a pretty good test for what they want to do to kind of polish it up before they, put it on TV, which this is being, I guess to break the fourth wall a little bit, this is being recorded on a Friday, the 31st. They are going to have some sort of, I think, recap show of what transpired earlier this week. But I think the actual action picks up again next Friday, April 7th. So
let me tell you something.
Yeah.
It's my birthday today, right? And nobody will know until nobody will know. I know, right? So nobody will know.
Happy
birthday! No, it's cool, it's cool. But like nobody will know until this goes out, right? And it won't be my birthday. But the only person who can celebrate it with me is Gootecks, because he can come back in time and celebrate it with me.
I was just about to say, do we have an image of Gootecks we can pull up? No, I'm just kidding. So ELeague, you brought it up, and I wanted to get your take on the production and how it evolved, and I guess how they polished it up over those 4 days. What did you think about that?
So they did a really good job, actually. Gootecks, he's like a social media god, just brilliant. He was very honest. When he was asked by Malik, is this organic? I think the question was, he said, absolutely not. Is it fun? Yes, it is. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. I didn't see day 1. I saw day 2. I thought it was pretty good. Day 3, I thought was the best day by far, because it was a mix of death pool, and also I felt like they got all the timings right in terms of matches versus like commentary and adverts.
Right.
And then day 4, I thought they were a little bit exhausted. I have to admit that day 4, I don't know if I was exhausted or if they were exhausted or if we were all exhausted, but day 4 felt kind of like a bit flat. But I felt like that was to be expected. But overall, I have to say, I think this whole esports, the transition into esports, is going pretty well. ESL, King of the Hill, Red Bull, and now ELeague.
Mm-hmm.
It's very watchable to me. How about you? I mean, what do you think?
Let's start with just overall. The production was, I thought, really, really good. Just overall, it obviously got better as the days went on. They asked for feedback, especially on social media, and they got it. They got a lot of great feedback. They got some feedback that maybe they didn't necessarily like, but we'll talk about. I think we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, we should.
Day 1 was the roughest of the most. Obviously, there was breaks between every single match, which I just thought was really weird. Commentary and hosting, it just felt like they hadn't quite found their footing. Obviously, these guys haven't worked together before. You have a host who is not used to hosting Street Fighter or fighting game related stuff. But I do want to say that, Richard Lewis, I thought he was great from the aspect of he wasn't a guy who comes in and is like, hey, I know everything, right? Yeah. Even if I don't know everything, I know everything, and I'm gonna make it seem like I do, right? He fully acted and showed that, like, look, I don't know everything. I'm learning as we're going along here, but that's why I have this awesome rotating cast of commentators and co-hosts for the most part. Tasty Steve, Sajam, Rip, and Z. Yeah. But so as the event went along throughout the 4 days, timing got better. You're definitely right. By day 3, everything was just like clicking perfectly. I thought they'd all just sort of come together. The day 3's production wasn't quite perfect in some ways, but I feel like they all just kind of meshed really well. And yes, day 4, I think it was just a matter of everyone was tired, right? The production, we're coming down off that high of day 3. And yeah, it was just that fourth long day of matches. Unfortunately, I do feel like the 4th day was a little flat. Not to take anything away from those players, they played their hearts out, and I don't know about you, but it was kind of cool to see like at least the 3 European players who were all in the same group make it out.
Yeah, the groups are a bit weird. I mean, I'm an Englishman, right? So I can be a little bit objective. Sometimes it feels like it's a TV show. We need Americans to be like kicking ass,
Right.
So, but I haven't looked that closely at the groups, but it was weird to see all the Europeans in one group. Having said that, I think you're right. I think Richard did a good played a good role. You know, as you know, like you and I both interview people, right? So when we interview people, our job is not to be the expert, because
Right.
that's the worst interview in the world, right? That's the worst.
Yeah.
That's the worst interview in the world. Is like, I know all of this. Do you agree? You know, like no, it's better to be like to have a protagonist, somebody who is prodding people and saying, "Well, I don't quite understand what's going on with Wolf Krone and K-Brad and blah blah blah," or I don't understand what whiff punish is, or something. You know, you need that to make
Yeah.
it feel a little bit more organic, like a conversation. Like I actually don't know. Tell me. But production wise, yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought it's not the same as FGC, and it's not going to be. So I guess the big question is, can the two coexist? You know, and the first question is going to be, will this be successful? Because it's all well and good for the FGC to say, yeah, this is fun. The question is it going to capture the imagination of other viewers?
It was interesting because the viewership throughout all 4 days was I think fairly consistent. Actually, day 4 the Twitch stream crashed for a little bit, so I had to switch over to YouTube. But
Yeah, that was
it was in the 25,000-30,000 viewer range for all of those days. But I think the question then becomes, because when you ask someone like us, we watch these things enough, is that successful? Well, I mean, considering pools, like 5,000 people might watch pools at any other event, right? 25, 30,000 on a Twitch stream for these group events or this preliminaries. I mean, that's definitely better than normal, I would say. And if you're talking about a major event like top 8, you know, anywhere from like 50,000 to 150, 200,000, whatever. I don't know. What do you consider, I guess, successful, especially considering this is going to TV now? Like, we don't even know what kind of numbers we'll get on TV, right? Versus Twitch. What's successful for the FGC when it comes to something like this?
I have no idea, but I will say this, right? So I think that Capcom are suddenly have you noticed how suddenly they've come alive with all these updates? Like, so it's
Right.
like suddenly there's like the CFN is up to speed. Like, you know, the CFN is working and all these statistics are working and they're doing this beta and they're trying to improve things. I'm not sure that loading times is improved, which would be great if they could do that as they move forward. But like that's happening, and it feels like, so there's this sort of purchase cycle, right? Like if I just go do the marketing thing real quick, but there's this purchase cycle, right? So there's this first sort of like moment where you see the advertisement or advertisement, right? And you go, wow, that looks cool. So you watch ELeague and you go, wow, that looks really cool. And then, you know, I guess there's another moment which has to do with packaging, which doesn't really matter. And then there's another moment where you play it for the first time or test it out for the first time. And so the game has to be in good shape. Certainly by the time they have, like, I would imagine they are targeting May 26th, like the finals, as like their big day, right? So the game has to be in really good shape that day. And by the way, May 26th is also the day in which they release Ultra Street Fighter 2. So it's, you know, it's no coincidence that the marketing is based around like ELeague TV is our best opportunity to bring in new players. But the game has to be in good shape, because otherwise people are going to buy the game and go, whoa, loading times are really long, netcode is really bad, I can't make sense of the UX, what the hell is going on? And so that once that happens, if they feel like they've been cheated in some form or fashion, like they're still playing a beta, it's a big problem, because then you lose trust and that becomes the story, right?
Right.
The game still isn't what it should be. The game still isn't finished. So I think I have hope and I have trust in Capcom that by May 26th, this game is going to be that portion of the game is going to be in good shape, because the gameplay portion of the game is in great shape. It needs it. You know, we can argue till the cows come home about, you know, what we like and what we don't like. That's all very subjective, right? But I think it's getting way better in terms of what you can watch. But I find that whole thing very interesting. That, you know, that they're suddenly these updates are all kind of happening at a much faster rate. You know?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's they're in a mode where, I mean, I think they always wanted to and I've talked a little bit with them since. They've always wanted to kind of look at this game post season 2 update and say, hey, maybe we need to do one more balance, or maybe we need to adjust some things after this, because it's hard to see this thing until you put it out there in the wild, how things are going to interact or how things will play out, right? So the idea that they're going to do a balance update, and they're doing this PC beta, which is currently going right now, which actually has the balance update in it. I actually didn't know that, but also CFN updates and things like that. All of these things are interesting to me because, and it's
people are so psyched. People are so psyched about the stages, and I love that because there's two things I love about that. One is it's attention to detail. Mm-hmm. So I think Capcom are like catching up. Like these new moves, I feel like it's like the characters were supposed to have them, and that's why they've got them now. Because everyone's like, why do these characters have these new moves? I don't understand. And it makes sense that maybe they were always meant to be there. They just weren't. Just missed the cut when they brought the game out. And the second thing is, I've got people who love the game, who like talk about frame data every day. I had Javits on my show the other day, talks about frame data and all this stuff and tech. And he's like, first thing he talks to me when he sees me is like, "Hey, Guile stage, you can smash the boxes, man." Right. I'm like, it's like I love that because the little boy in all of us who's like, can you smash the boxes or not? Because that's really important to me. That does something, like that releases endorphins in my brain. And I think I just think those are good signs. But I didn't mean to cut you off, so please.
No, yeah, I think you're right, and I think as a way, they clearly haven't or don't want to go down the path, at least right now, of we're gonna repackage this game and put out like a super version or whatever you want to call it, right? I think it's important to note too that we're also coming up on the 30th anniversary of Street Fighter. That's this year, and so between that, Street Fighter being on TV, Ultra Street Fighter, like you just mentioned, it's the idea that they want to, I don't know, reconnect obviously with those that they've kind of maybe lost or turned away, but at the same time, being on TV, they're going to have new people, new eyeballs, right? And one interesting point you actually brought up to me was the lack of Ryu, actually. And it's unfortunate that this new update isn't out yet, because I mean, I don't even know that Daigo will change his mind once that update comes out, if they're in the middle of this ELeague premiere or regular season, I guess I should say, because to switch characters like that for him, I don't know if that makes sense in the middle of something like that. But you brought up the great point. There's no Ryu, and he's literally, like, if you watch the promo they put out, Ryu is like featured prominently in this promo. Yeah. Nobody plays him because he sucks.
No, it's a big. I think from a marketing perspective, I've said it before, and like when you balance a game, like maybe you shouldn't have these thoughts in your head, but I don't know. It's Street Fighter. I don't feel like Ryu should be in the bottom 5 or wherever he is right now. Right. I feel like I know that people always talk about First Strike. Ryu wasn't that great, and Ken was, but he was kind of a very similar character back then. And yeah, you'll see some Kens. I was thinking about this today. You'll see some Kens, and that's fine. You'll see a Chun-Li. Is it a Chun-Li? Maybe I think MOV is like the only Chun-Li.
Yeah,
maybe
MOV is the only one.
But you probably won't see a Chun-Li winning. Like, when I think about it, just purely from marketing and people sitting down, like, I imagine these people turning over and like somebody going, "Oh, it's Street Fighter." Like I used to play this when I was a kid. And they might with their kids. Like, you've got young kids, right? You might with your kids be like, "It's Street Fighter. Let's watch this for a bit. Let's see." I didn't even know it was like, I didn't know they had a new game or whatever. Like, the next question is probably going to be, where's Ryu? Right? Like, where's Ryu? Why is no one playing Ryu? I don't get it. Why is no one playing Ryu?
Currently, he's in the dumpster.
Yeah, I want to buy this game, but Ryu's not in it. Is Ryu not in this game? Because I really want to play this game. It's just a bit unfortunate the way the game is.
Do you think they would go to Daigo and be like, hey, Daigo, you think maybe one of these games you might take one for the team and just Oh, maybe throw Ryu out there just once.
Dude, I have no idea what goes on in the background. Like, I mean, the TV, like, that's why people. I mean, let's think about this, right? Really, esports is a business, right?
Right.
Capcom is a business.
Yep.
The FGC. This is the reason people have sort of an issue with moving. Moving from the FGC to esports, right? I'm not so sure that you necessarily have to move from one to the other. I think you can have both. But esports is a business, and we know that because it's an invitational, and they invited people who would look good on TV and like be like tonight on the show, which people will have seen. Yesterday, Richard Lewis said that they would bring Li Joe back to help break down the games because he's brilliant in front of camera and people know him from Evo and it's a good link and he's and all that stuff and all of that makes sense. So there's a lot of key business decisions that are made. Now, when they nerfed the hell out of Ryu, it made no sense to me. It made no sense. No, it really did make no sense to me because I just thought you've got like this guy in Japan who's the first ever professional esports guy. I hate the word terms esports athlete, all that stuff, right? First ever paid competitive gamer, right? And he literally is often called Ryu. Like he is the walking Ryu, right? Like that's how people think of him. So the fact that you've nerfed the hell out of his character is crazy to me because he has his own show. The amount of people that watch that show is insane. In that show, he's teaching you Street Fighter. And so he teaches you from the perspective of Ryu, which all of us can understand. Now, is he now going to teach his show from the perspective of Guile? Because I think his viewers will drop off a little bit if that's what happens. I love Daigo. He's Lord Daigo. We all know that. Yep. But he's the purist. He's Ryu, and maybe the game just isn't based around Ryu because it's not really based around zoning. It's a very different game. But to me, from a marketing perspective, I would have kept Ryu at least mid tier because Daigo can still beast with mid tier, right? And it would be this season. It wouldn't be like, oh my god, I have to wait till season 3. And I guess we'll see because he has a few buffs like his light. I think his standing light kick and his medium punch, something like that. But I think after a throw, he still doesn't have. I think it goes straight back into neutral after a throw. Yep. Which might be the issue. I don't know. I don't play him anymore. So, I moved on to Akuma, who gets killed in one hit by Balrog. So
that's right. If you haven't submitted, submitted your 2-hit challenge to Javits yet on killing Akuma, or your 2-touch challenge, I guess. You brought up an interesting point about the whole sort of like FGC versus esports. I don't want to dig too deep into this topic because I think this is sort of a thing that we being just the FGC are constantly talking about or maybe battling. I do think though there is a distinction. We've kind of talked about it just now, but there's this distinction of, yes, there's the FGC, the grassroots level stuff, the open tournament stuff, and there's esports, Capcom Pro Tour, which features a lot of those grassroots open tournament stuff, but it's still esports. Red Bull Kumite, ELeague, these things are esports. And in talking about Daigo, actually, one of the interesting things to me is like, Daigo's like, yeah, you know what, I love Ryu, I want to play for fun, I'll make it work. He gets bopped at final round, and then he's like, you know what? I'm going to switch to Guile. And part of me is like, look, you want to stick with Ryu? I'm all for that. You're Lord Daigo. You can do whatever the heck you want. Your sponsors will most likely still be around. No matter how good or bad you're doing, you're probably going to be okay. But for me, as someone who watches Daigo, who loves Daigo, I mean, just like almost everyone else out there, I want to see Daigo win. I want to see, look, my favorite player is Xian. I begged Xian for almost all of Season 1 to switch because I want to see the guy win. And switching to Guile, maybe that's not the favorite character. Maybe that's not the character I want to see him play or you want to see him play or anyone else wants to see him play, but he's also going to get results. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we remember. So when we're talking about FGC versus esports, where's like that line that we're drawing between being, because we saw Twitter battles about this too. We'll probably touch on that in a little bit, but some of the Twitter battles about you know, being FGC and being esports, like FChamp tweeted something about, I love these invitationals. I wish there was more of them. And then we can get rid of, or they can compete with the 100+ open tournaments, whatever. And all the TOs are like, whoa, wait a minute. like we don't want these open tournaments to go away, right? I don't know, where do we draw the line? What's the distinction?
Well, I don't want the open tournaments to go away. And okay, so let's sort of look at, imagine esports, the invitationals are successful, right?
Yeah.
This is my only concern. Like I want them to coexist, but I still want to be able to go to an open tournament and bump into or have an opportunity to play these guys. That's what makes the FGC so special, right? Is like I do my interviews because of open tournaments. If there were invitationals only, I wouldn't be able to reach those guys. There's just no chance in hell. Like the FGC has always been special in that regard, right? Some people would argue, well, that's just the price you pay for like growing up. That's what happens, right? But you've got this, you know, you've got this element of like, if esports is super successful, do the open tournaments go away? Do the players turn up to the open tournaments if they can make their money out of like esports? You know, I would like to see both coexist. I would like to see these guys always at the open tournament. I prefer. That's why I love the open tournaments. I just, you know, maybe the esports thing, you know, like my perfect idea, my perfect scenario, I think, would be, well, Red Bull Kumite is close. Like Red Bull Kumite has a day before it has a last chance qualifier.
Yep.
Right. I get that with a decent production, you need a decent set of people. When I say decent, it's just a word. Don't, you know, at least I can't think of a better word right now. But you need like a group of people who are going to be interesting. They have different types of characters. They are different places. They have different types of personalities, and you know months in advance about them, so you film stuff with them that is intriguing to the audience. You can put together the show, you know, months or weeks before it actually happens, so that the actual content is incredible and it's not live. But they have a last chance qualifier as well, right? So two people can still make it in. I think, you know, some of these. I don't like the idea of it's a closed invitational. And I get that 16 for ELeague, I get that 16 of them qualified via Capcom Cup, but they didn't know that when they were doing Capcom Cup. You know, maybe next year if they're doing it again, it's like, oh, okay, if I want to be on ELeague, I have to qualify through Capcom Cup. But then it's just those 16 guys who potentially qualify for every single invitational. You know, just those 16. So in my mind, the perfect scenario for these invitationals might be that you hold, I don't know, dude, maybe you hold like an open tournament a month before, and you go, the top 32 are going to go into this thing, you know, and it's no longer called an invitational. Or 16 will be invited and 16 will qualify, but but you know, it's not just the 16 from Capcom Cup or something like that. I like the idea of, you know, open tournaments. I like the idea of the Rocky story. I like the idea of like somebody unknown coming through. You know, Punk got invited, you know, which is cool. That was very close, borderline. Like you know, there's every chance that he would, you know, maybe might not have been invited, and then we would have seen him like just bopping everyone, and it would have been like, damn, I wish there was a last minute qualifier, because this guy would come through and probably win the whole thing. So that's my only caution, I guess, in my mind, is my only caution about invitationals and esports is that, certainly from my perspective, I don't want to see it become too elitist. I don't want to see it become this thing where you know, in order to get to the players, you have to stand by the edge of a red carpet, and ask for their autograph. You know, like that's why I think, you know, the FGC has always been special. And maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe like that's just the way it is. Maybe it's just like everything starts small and then it gets big, and then a whole bunch of people get left behind, because that's what's going on Twitter right now. There's a bunch of people feeling like perhaps they are being left behind. So there's resistance, you know, and it's not a nice feeling to feel like, hey, I helped grow the FGC for 20 years, and now I have, there was an argument between Richard Lewis and Ultra David, right? And it was a silly argument, to be honest, and I'm sure they both wish they hadn't had it. But it was.
I'm not so sure about that.
But I'm just saying, like it got pretty nasty, right? And I just thought it sucks because on the one hand you've got a guy who, Richard Lewis has been around for a long time doing all sorts of amazing things for esports. There's no doubt about that. And right. Ultra David has been doing a lot of amazing things for the FGC. And so to have like Ultra David be around from the very beginning and be making these shows every single day and working his ass off and helping people grow and helping the FGC grow and commentating and doing all these amazing things. And then, Richard Lewis saying, you sound bitter because you've been left out. It just sucks on both sides. I don't want to, as a viewer, as an FGC, as someone, involved in the FGC, I don't want to see it. Like, I don't want to see it. There should be, those guys should figure that. They got to figure it out. Like, they gotta like have some respect for each other. That's just my perspective on it. It's just,
I guess for context, obviously what we're talking about, if you saw any of this on Twitter, we're talking about Richard Lewis, not just Richard Lewis, everybody was asking for feedback on ELeague in general, but this was sort of born out of the controversy between Wolf Krone and K-Brad, specifically Ultra David. I think to kind of summarize was like, hey, I think this is really cool. I'm not so sure about having that security guard on the stage, kind of perpetuating this idea that, I don't know, like we're FGC, like the true thuggery, right? Like we're true thugs and we got to have a guy here in case these two guys can't actually behave themselves after a match or whatever. So David tweets about this stuff, and you're right. I mean, if you don't know who Ultra David is, I'm not saying that, and I don't think David was coming from this viewpoint of like, hey, I've been around for years. You should listen to me. I don't even know that he necessarily feels like, hey, I've been left behind either. But the idea of like, hey, here's a guy, a prominent member of our fighting game community who has been around for years, like you said, grinding it out, playing the games, first of all, and then commentating. I mean, he and James kind of set the table for commentary in fighting games and fighting games as an esport. Like they were one of the original ones doing it, with the Wednesday night fights, technically before it was Wednesday night fights, going way back. So, he makes his comments, and then of course Richard Lewis kind of comes in. I know a lot of people have strong feelings about Richard Lewis. I just want to keep this. I guess my feeling is, look, he's doing great as a host. Coming in and sort of, I guess, attacking, I don't know, more or less some of the members who have spoken up, and I think fairly, given their fair assessment or opinions on some things. It's a little weird, and to have, when you want to please the fighting game community, as they clearly do, I think ELeague has worked really hard to please the fighting game community. Yes, they invited some players that maybe we wouldn't normally have seen otherwise. I don't know, but overall, it really seems like they wanted us. They wanted to embrace the FGC, but wanted us to embrace them. So I think as a whole, they kind of accomplished that. But then you have some of these other things, and it's kind of weird. And I would like to see that not happen in the future. I don't know, how they kind of clean that up. But maybe I definitely.
And an extension of the thuggery. Maybe it's so.
So I guess maybe this kind of brings me. This kind of brings me to the point of the Ultra David Richard Lewis stuff. Don't know how much was manufactured. Let's say. I don't necessarily feel like that exchange was, but there were some things that in that production. How much of this do you think is, I guess, fake versus real, and how much of this do we need to have, or how much of this do they need to put out there to this audience, whether it's us or this new audience it's a production, right? Like how much of that needs to be part of the production, I guess?
So yeah, it's a good question because I was thinking about it. So you're clearly going to do your research, figure out what's interesting about each of these people, and push it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all rivalries, right? So, for instance, I actually really enjoyed when Justin was talking about buying his parents, like setting his mum up in Vegas and buying the furniture and all that sort of stuff. And it was like, that was really interesting. It's kind of nice to hear stories like that. The humanity, the human side of him. Justin Wong. A lot of people like to hate on him. He actually says a lot of this stuff on Twitter, but I think you have to see somebody speaking, from the heart, and I like that. So, I think there are more colors to the FGC than just let's get to know this person as a thug. Everybody's a thug. Everybody should. Are you a thug? You're not thuggish enough. You need to be more thuggish. Everybody needs to be more thuggish. The commentary was interesting. Like they were definitely trying to be as savage as possible. But it was fun. It was fun savagery. I love seeing, when I talk about real versus fake, I think what we're really talking about here is real versus fake, right? So you do need stuff, exciting stuff, right? Let's call it interesting stuff, right? But the question is, how much of it is real and how much of it is fake? Now, what was interesting about the K-Brad Wolf Krone was I thought it was going to be like really fake and over the top and all that sort of stuff. Now, what I think contributed to what felt real was K-Brad was not expecting to go home. So he was angry. I don't even think at Wolf Krone. I think he was angry at himself and the situation, right? So there was an element of realness there. Then you've got the best thing about Wolf Krone is like his misunderstanding of what's going on around him. So you can't fake that misunderstanding of what's going on around you, right? Wolf Krone, I've never interviewed him, right? I don't know, so I don't know what his deal is. I've heard stories about when he shared a room with Alex Valle and had a bunch of. He tweeted this out, Alex Valle. He shared a room with Alex Valle for a tournament, and he had a whole bunch of great players in the room. Alex Valle did, practicing together. Wolf Krone slipped off and turned another PlayStation on and played online. Right, which just the weird, that sort of thing I find hilarious. That's real, it's just weird and it's real. And I thought that what I thought was really ironic, which Wolf Krone didn't even realize the irony of it while it was happening, was when they said to K-Brad what happened in that match, he said he was doing some stuff I didn't know how to react to, right? So Wolf Krone's like, you're making excuses, right? So K-Brad's like, I'm just saying what happened. You did some cool stuff which I didn't know. He's like, excuses. Then they interview Wolf Krone later on when he loses, right? He had one loss, I forget to who, but he had one loss. It was MOV, right? So the first thing he says is MOV was doing this thing where he activates V-trigger when I try to do the elbow, and I'm like, you're doing what K-Brad did. How is this any different? This is exactly the same thing. So the irony was not lost on me, but I guess it was lost on him. But the way that thing played out, in the end, it played out pretty well. It played out pretty real, I don't really know about the security. I don't know if the security. I didn't even notice the security guard. I don't know if he was supposed to.
Oh, that was the first thing I noticed.
I didn't even. I guess I must.
I'm like, hold on. I tweeted it out as soon as I saw it. I was like, hold on. Why is there a security guard on the stage? Has there been a security guard there the whole time and I didn't notice? And yeah, no, he just magically appeared, and I'm just like, wow, are they really doing this?
Look, here's the deal, right? I think it's hard to sort of say. So at Evo, there was a random dude who ran up on stage.
The spirit of Marvel 3, as apparently they call him now.
Right. So it's not like crazy shit doesn't happen sometimes. Yeah. Did they have the security guard in shot specifically at that one time for that one match? Yeah. Did they do it for the stick, as Ultra David put it? Probably. Did it work or did it backfire? I don't know. Did it backfire for? It backfired for the FGC guys, but would it backfire for? Would it make for good drama on TV? I don't know. It's esports, It's I think that's sort of like the crux of your question is how much of it is real, how much of it's fake. Like, do they really need to show the security guard? Probably not. They don't need to show the security guard unless they're trying to say this is going to turn into a fight, you know. But I like what I think the biggest, for me, the biggest question whenever I talk about thuggery is everyone has a different definition of what that is. So it's like thuggery, let's use the term thuggery. And then all of a sudden, everybody who's been using the term thuggery says, you didn't need a security guard because they would never, ever fight. And you're like, well, what are you talking about? I mean, it's pretty hard to misinterpret if you're not in the FGC. Like, you're telling me there's like thuggery, and I've seen videos from the back in the day and all these stories about everybody used to fight each other and knife each other, and sometimes a gun got pulled in the arcades and all this stuff, right? So it's like thuggery. And then it's like, whoa, you had a security guard? Are you crazy? That's so disrespectful. We would never fight. We would never throw a fist. So it's like, what is the definition? What is thuggery? What the hell is it? Because I don't know.
So let me ask you, since you said everyone has a different definition, and actually before I ask you that, let me just say that I know a lot of people were sort of on the extremes of the security guard thing, as far as I really hated it, or I thought it was, I don't know, they liked it. I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle, like, it was weird. Like, I'm like, all right, this security guards or whatever. The whole K-Brad Krone thing was awkward. It was brilliant at times and just really awkward at times. And, I think at the end of the day, it played out, I think, really well for ELeague because, hey, this is a story that, about ELeague now. And, you touched on the Justin Wong thing and the idea of actually, before we move on to thuggery, I want to get your take on this. You touched on the Justin Wong thing, and you're right. I love hearing about people, talking to people and hearing about people and like their human sides. We know these players as players. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Twitch, you can see Daigo, the player, anytime you want. But we don't get enough of a look, and some players don't want to give you that look. I get that, but we don't get enough of a look at the human side of players. We saw the human side of Li Joe at top 8 Evo, right? And you mentioned the idea. We talked about this before the event. You were wondering if Tokido would use an interpreter, which he ended up, of course, not using one. He's really confident about his English, but Infiltration did, and every time Infiltration and I have gotten to know each other fairly well. Infiltration almost always uses an interpreter. I don't think I've ever seen him, not use one. So when you're watching these things, what is the appeal there that you want to see from these guys? Specifically like the Tokidos and the Infiltrations. Tokido, we see, I guess we see an element of Tokido that we don't see when he plays, whereas Infiltration, he's still kind of this mysterious guy, I guess, right? Like, what is it that you want to see from these players, especially as it becomes esports?
So the thing about Infiltration is, because I love Infiltration, right? I've done a number of interviews with him. I think he's an amazing person, and he actually speaks good English, like. But he likes to speak Korean for a number of reasons. Like, he wants his Korean followers to hear what he's saying, exactly what he's saying, and not be misinterpreted. But the thing is, I think that when you either have to be like super expressive, like Aita, and you can get away with the translator, right? Because you go, this guy, I like this guy. He's kind of like hype. He pops off. That's cool. Tokido, interestingly, when I interviewed him recently, I had people coming in who'd never heard him speak English before, right? And I had them literally say, I thought he was completely different. I thought he was serious. He wasn't really my type of guy. And now I'm going to root for him. And I think that's really important, is that you want to, if you're working on your brand, particularly in the US, whereas all the esports money is here. Like Echo Fox is the biggest team. It's here. The invitationals are here. Even the Capcom final happens here. And a lot of tournaments, money, and all that sort of stuff, right? And it's not really a lot of tournaments in Korea or Japan with money, at least. So you want to work on your brand, and you want to work on your persona, and you want people to root for you. you know, most of the time they're always going to root for an American. The Americans are, at least in America, right? But if you can give them a reason to root for you when there's no Americans in the picture, that's a really good thing. And if you can give them a reason to like you, not just because you play well, but because you're whatever, because you're a cool person or interesting character, I think that's important. And I think that's harder to do when you have a translator, because the translator stands next to you, and it just sends this, you know, it's not fair, but it does send this symbol. It sends this message of this guy is foreign, you know, like, you know, like, you know, whereas you got Tokido kind of laughing and smiling and talking in English, and you're like, I kind of like this guy, you know, he's kind of cool. Like, you know, to use the euphemism and be literal, he speaks my language, you know, like, and I think that, you know, I would, because the thing about Infiltration is he at the moment he sort of looks a little menacing. He's got his hood up and everything, and like, you know, he looks a little scary, but he's actually like this really fun guy. I would love it if he you know, if he did those interviews in English. You know, he sometimes, you know, he did the download complete, and that was like everything to people. You know, at Evo, like the download complete was like, oh yeah, it's amazing. But if he'd done it like through his translator, it would have been forgotten the next day, you know? It probably wouldn't have been translated properly. It would be like, like download. I think he said something about download pending, or he downloaded something. I don't know. Something, he saved something to his hard drive. You know, like, you can see how mistranslations happen, right? So if they are able to speak English, you know, even I did an interview with Itzan, and his English is not great, but people love it. They love it, and they can see his character more. So I was very happy when Tokido did that. I was worried that because it felt like a much more professional setting, that it should somehow be like, we're only going to do it through a translator. I'm so glad. I think AJ made that call, was team manager, you know, like, or had probably chatted with Tokido, and they probably talked it through with the whole team. I'm sure ELeague, AJ, everybody talked it through, but I think it was the right move. And I would love to see more players like Infiltration, who definitely has a decent grasp of English, do it.
Yeah, with Tokido, I mean, I've asked him before too. I'm like, hey, do you want to do an interview with an interpreter, or do you want to just do it? He's like, it's up to you. I'm like, well, you know, I know you're comfortable with it, so let's just do it, right? One of the interesting things that you brought up is that barrier, right? Like with these interpreters, there is a barrier. With between the player and the audience, and you're right. Like, people don't really understand how fun or how good of a guy someone like Infiltration may be, because, you know, he just kind of looks mean when he's sitting up there on the stage. But to be fair, I think there's plenty of Americans that are the same way. LPN used to have the same. I don't know if people still kind of consider him the same way, but man, people used to be afraid to come up to LPN just because when he gets on stage, he just looks mean, right? Which LPN's a great dude. I love the guy. He's an amazing dude. He wants people to come up to him and talk to him and whatever. But, you know, it's like sometimes you get up there and you're in your zone. I know I feel that way too. I'm gonna play in a tournament tomorrow, and I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna have my game face on. Like, I don't even want to shake hands with my opponent, because I'm from back in the day. We don't do that. Speaking of thuggery, you brought that up earlier, and I wanted to get your take on what your definition of thuggery. Like, where's your thuggery level right now, and how do we, I don't know, how do we let it rock without really having to, I guess, manufacture it, or even sort of, I guess, prod it a little bit like ELeague did?
I think Punk is the best example of just very witty thuggery. I mean, thuggery is just an odd term, right? It's something that we've latched onto. It's something that we own. It came from the Capcom rule set. Remember, no thuggery. Now, when Capcom wrote that rule set, I think they probably meant no fighting, right? But they chose the term thuggery. So I'm still a little bit unclear on that. And you can understand why there's a misunderstanding. Like, when people go on and on and on about back in the day this, back in the day that, and fights and all that, like I said before, I guess my definition of thuggery is different for everybody, but I guess my favorite thuggery is really what Punk does. Like, I like the trash talking from Punk. It feels very real. He does it in a very laid back way. You know, watching him and Flash Metroid go back and forth was kind of funny. Like that was funny stuff. You know, like I like I guess you would say for me personally, and it's different for everybody. I kind of like the funny thuggery. I don't necessarily like the these two people are going to kill each other thuggery. You know, like with
so Wolf Krone K-Brad, where are we? Are we still in funny right now?
The Wolf Krone K-Brad thing is interesting, right? Because it's like the FGC, you know, some of the FGC is like, you didn't need a security guard. And then you've got like Wolf Krone goes on these rants on Facebook, right? Which are pretty like, they don't seem manufactured at all. They seem pretty real.
Yeah.
And I've often wondered, so this is where my head goes, right? I go, if Wolf Krone was in K-Brad's neck of the woods on his own, and K-Brad was with his boys, nothing would happen. If K-Brad was on his own, down a dark alley, and Wolf Krone was with his boys, would something happen? I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I know that nothing's going to happen at events, but like I think to K-Brad, it's all sort of like fun and games, you know? To Wolf Krone, I have no idea. Like, I know maybe that sounds like a really silly thing to say, but I think there's this sort of like I said, no one is really clear on what the definition of thuggery is. And, you know, to me, I like the wit that Punk brings. That when he did a tweet, I'm sure you can probably find it, but he did a tweet at Justin Wong, where it was just playful banter. But Justin was like, I think he complimented Justin on his car in play, and Justin said, "Yeah, just trying to get nice like you." And he did this play, really clever play on words, which was, you know, the Alpha Bravo Foxtrot alphabet, where he was like, well, you know, because Justin's Echo Fox, he was like, well, you got a long way to go because you got to go from Fox, and he went all the way down until he got to Alpha, which of course he's the Alpha, right? Which I just thought was brilliant. I thought it was hilarious and brilliant, and you know, it was you know, it was more playful banter, to be perfectly honest, because he doesn't have a problem with Justin, but the people he does have a problem with, the people he is rivals with, you know, he's funny, man. He's like, I have to put this person in their place. I had to let him know. I had to play. He like, to me, thuggery is like when he pulls out another character, you know, versus Mike versus Ike, right? He played Nikali. You know why he did that? Because his best mate plays Nikali, and his best friend plays Nikali, and his best friend said, "Will you play Nikali for me?" He's like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll beat this." And afterwards, he's like, "I'll beat this guy with anyone. Doesn't really matter."
Yeah.
Like that's to me, that's hilarious, and that's like thuggery to me. I don't know that you necessarily need people up in each other's faces. If it's real, fine. You know, if it's real, fine. Like, yeah. But guess what? If it is real, you will need security. So it's like I'm somewhat lost in the world of thuggery right now, in terms of like people sort of promoting it and then sort of saying, well, you know, then there would never be any fighting, you know, and at the same time saying.
I mean, look, I love a good pop off. I love you know,
they're great.
Yeah, I mean, pop offs are great. I mean, I think about Wolf Krone, and I still think about, what are you standing up for? My favorite thing was like in that MOV match, and he stood up, and I'm just like, why is he standing? Like, what is he doing? Why is he standing up? Does he think this is done? I think the trash talking, I have no issue with that whatsoever. I mean, you know, it goes back years, right? We used to do it to each other, whatever. The security guard thing again was a little weird, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's become sort of a meme now. Capcom put this out there, this word out there in their rule set, and you know, we of course being the FGC, they just ran with it, right? So it's strange. And now as things become more esports, you know, we're sort of trying to define everything and sort of put things in their little boxes, right? And I feel like this is one of them, but I also feel like this is not a thing, like you said, if it's natural, if it's a real thing, it's going to be fine, whether, you know, on TV, on stream, whatever, no matter what. I don't necessarily feel like we need to play these things up any more than they already are. Having said that, we've talked about the event, we've talked about thuggery, we've talked about the esports and stuff, but let's talk about surprises and upsets. Let's talk about some of the matches of the event. I want to get your thoughts on that. But all of that and more in part 2 of this Conversations and Fireballs.